Everybody, members of the diplomatic corps and members of media and other colleagues from ESCAP and other institutions. I think this year's economic report, economic and social report, is pretty comprehensive and also does require some special treatment, and that's why we decided also to start by splitting so that we can, between me, Hamza, and other colleagues, to basically get to you the real messages of the report. Our assessment is that sustained and resilient economic growth is a prerequisite for the successful implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Everything we do revolves around that primary message. In recent years, the Asia-Pacific region has experienced a considerable slowdown in economic growth. The region has the means and dynamism to revive growth, but improving the quality of this growth by making it more inclusive and sustainable development will be more demanding. The next phase of Asia-Pacific economic growth needs to be driven by broad-based productivity gains and rebalancing of economies towards domestic and regional demand. This will require higher and targeted fiscal spending, enhanced skills, better infrastructure, and improved agriculture productivity. The challenges, one of the more immediate ones is, of course, that we do see a slowdown in ASEAN as a whole. If you look at our numbers from 2011-2013, record of 5% growth, and some years have been exceptionally high growth there. We are now down to 4.3% in 2015, and we expect it to stabilize in the range of 4.5 to 4.8% in the 16 and 2017. This is because of a range of reasons. One, of course, it's been hit like every other economy that is more export-led economy by the external trade slowdown, but also the domestic consumption has been has declined, in fact. Now these trends we have already touched upon, so they're pretty common across the region, but given that these economies are more export-led, you see the phenomena of the deceleration. But I would say on the whole the prospects seem great, but it will all depend on how effectively ASEAN community evolves itself in terms of actually implementing the blueprint, and that will depend a lot on how the region closes the development gaps. As you know, you have the high achievers, and then you have CLMV countries, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, that have more sharper development gaps. Also, the ones that are more dynamic need to get out of the middle income trap themselves. We also have high income countries that are witnessing challenges because of their very high level of global integration relative to the others. But this will all be lifted if productivity enhancement measures that we have talked about take place. Growth historically has been more through factor accumulation in the past, so more will depend on productivity enhancement. You also see this, what has been a blessing has become a challenge, is that ASEAN is more dependent on China, and what's happening in China impacts Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, which are more dependent with the PRC trade. So they need to clearly move towards more diversification. ASEAN Economic Community has good potential. Of course, there's talk about more lifting of the non-tariff barriers, as I see, because tariffs are fairly the issues of tariffs have been addressed by and large, and there is a program reduction for the weaker economies, which is going to help out. But I think the bulk of the action will be needed on improving competitiveness, productivity, and there are lots of actions and intricate legal performances that everybody has to deliver. The challenge is there are 250 plus or even more measures. But the good news is that they have adopted a scorecard mechanism to monitor their compliance with the progress. There are a few other issues that I'd like to quickly mention, which I would loop in the challenges, that you have significant inequality within the countries, but also among them, as I pointed out, there are differences in the development gaps. So how the region plays its political economy would be quite critical in trying to lift the CLMV countries, because they could, the more you lift them, the more demand will be internally generated in the ASEAN itself, which will be a very cost-effective way of lifting growth for the smaller economy and also lifting their development gap. The second is that, as maybe Hamza was pointing out in the graphs, that the private debt issue is quite significant for a couple of countries there, Malaysia and Thailand, both in terms of household and corporate debt, and it's important to stabilize that. There is some sense of deleveraging emerging on the scene, but unless it is addressed, there will be additional challenges to reviving domestic demand. We also have done a policy brief lately on the tax issues in ASEAN. So you do have some good performer economies, but I think what is important to recognize is that there is a sense of a competition in terms of the tax holidays and exemptions. What needs to take place more in ASEAN is to stabilize this, because excessive exemptions and holidays are not going to really help out, but it will actually induce a very unhealthy competition to attract resource flows not necessarily aligned with the competitive advantage. So I'll stop here. I think it's the prospect to just conclude. I do feel that there's a huge amount of dynamism in this region and great potential. But I think keeping an eye on some of these issues and fast-tracking the real issues, implementations will help the region lift the game going forward. Thank you.